I lost my first wife after 54 years of marriage.
I knew that.
And after 3 years of bachelorhood, I married a lady that is a longtime businesswoman here in Morton. And her name was Carol Lindstrom. Yeah. Carol Lindstrom and her husband were both pilots.
I didn't know she was.
And they had a total of 7 airplanes altogether. And they, 24 years ago, they flew around the world in an air race, which I thought was probably one of the few people that have done that.
I'm sure that's true, and that's got to be where Bob Raitt got some of his enthusiasm.
Bob Raitt was her brother.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
and Bob was a pilot.
Right.
Yes.
And a lot of that came from his experience with his sister and his brother-in-law. Yeah,
Probably did.
You told me that one.
And now Carol's oldest son has a plane, and he is a pilot.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I don't know if you remember the fella that we hired when we first formed the Economic Development Council, the consultant.
Okay.
And Glenn, can't even think of his last name myself right now. But after having worked with Morton and the Economic Development Council, that's formative stages in the elected officials for a period of, I don't know, maybe a year or so, he told me about the time he wrapped up the project. I took him out to lunch and he said, you know, he said, I've been here for X amount of time. He said, you could run the world from Morton. He had such regard for the experience and capabilities of the people.
Of the people that are here.
They are unusual, I think, in that respect. But when you grew up, this was a pretty small town, mostly farming. The two big influences were apostolic and Mennonite, and basically agricultural. Is that not correct?
That's true. And actually, Morton was not suited for farming because of its swampy area. It was all swamp, actually, and just a couple of Mortonites got the idea of building field tile to drain this acreage around here, and now it's a high production agricultural area. We have people here that are developing new ways to farm, more modern ways to farm. Town keeps growing, and it's also it excels in a lot of things. Morton Buildings was the largest agricultural building company in the world. I just can't say enough good things about the town.
It's hard not to stop finding good things about Morton. That's why I'm still here.
One of the things that I did, I was very active in the JCs too, and I eventually ended up, I was a state vice president. But in my capacity as a JC, Caterpillar asked us to see if we could get an airport built here in Morton. And so I set out to get all of the pilots in Morton together and see if we could find a location to build an airport. We did find that, and it happened to be parallel to Main Street, and it was right near where Caterpillar was expanding into a new area. We didn't have any money to buy land, but we did have a signed agreement from the owners of the property where we wanted to build the runway to lease the property for a number of years. But after several years of attempting to get it approved, we couldn't get state approval, and the project died. Oh, one of my failures.
Well, there weren't many of them.
Well, the other one was the the J.C.'s, we designed a plate for the big farm show that the Yorties were going to have in the 60s. And
oh, yeah. Farm Progress.
we ordered 3,000 of those plates, and we were going to sell those and make money and buy the playground equipment for the parks. Well, there was a large crowd of people showed up. They were all parked on the road trying to get into it, so we had a captive audience. And it was very hot. They didn't want any plates, they wanted water. Had we had bottled water, we'd have made a fortune.
What do you remember? What do you remember about growing up when Morton was a small town? What did people do?
Well, most things I remember is how ornery I was. Morton had actually 3 different potteries, and one of those potteries burnt down, and the kilns that they had were still there. They were not ruined or anything. And the pottery company just kind of left everything there.
Right.
And a bunch of us kids found little, they were little mugs. They looked like a barrel that they were making, and they were just right. It was just like a hand grenade. So we would each get in one end of those kilns and throw those little pottery things at each other. And then from that we graduated to BB gun fights. And Red Ryder and their wisdom started making pump air BB guns, and they got too
powerful,
too dangerous for kids playing with them, and so that kind of ended that. I remember in grade school they started to deliver milk to the grade kids in the morning. We would take a break and everybody would drink milk. Well, a few of our more intelligent kids decided we'll go to the bakery and get some of their donuts, and then we'll hand them out at school and make it milk and donuts. Well, our class had one girl that was exceptionally beautiful, and the boys started giving her a donut. Each boy would give her a donut, and it was kind of embarrassing for her because the donuts would pile up on her desk, and some of the girls never got a donut. So that's one of the more amusing memories I have. I did playing sandlot baseball. I managed to be a catcher, and the person that was at bat wanted to hit a home run, and he stepped back to swing and caught my head instead of the ball and knocked me cold. Luckily, my dad was pouring concrete right across the street, and he came over and put a cold rag on my head and got me conscious again. So that's one of the highlights of the week.
What did you do on evenings, weekends?
I was the only person that drove to school in the 8th grade. We lived 2 miles out of town. There was no school buses, and so my parents let me drive the car. And at noon, I would load kids up in that car and they would sit in the windows and hold hands across the top of the car, and then get it to rock. And we'd drive down Main Street with that car rocking one way and then the other. At that time, Morton had one policeman, no police car, and he only had a nightstick. He didn't even have a gun. And so he couldn't do anything. Well, people started telling my dad what I was doing, and that was the end of that.
Was that policeman Bartolome?
Yes, yes. His job was to make sure all the stores were locked when they were supposed to be locked. That was about it.
Bud Zobrist tells stories about Bartolome making his rounds, and I think there was some place downtown here where maybe they had a card game or something that went on once they locked the doors, and he would go by and does that ring a bell?
I didn't see it.
Okay.
But Bud lived in town. I lived in the country.
Well, I may have gotten it wrong, so I'll have to ask Bud about that. Okay. Main Street was not very long in those days, though.
No, my dad said that he got to help pour the concrete for Main Street, the first hard street that they had. And I remember one night, 1964, I think it was, I bowled late, and I was sitting at the intersection of Main and Jefferson. And Morton had its one stoplight at that time. And the stoplight was red, so I had to stop. There wasn't another car coming. And then all of a sudden, whoof, one of the stores was ablaze. It kind of looked like it blew up. And nobody in the streets. It was blazing away. So I just sat there, and no fire truck, no. Finally, the light changed to green, and so I just turned and went to the bowling alley.
Really?
It ended up 3 stores burnt totally there. I remember an older man would walk around town, and he never seemed to have a job or anything. His name was Hans Casagrande. Hans Casagrande, everyone he would come and see, he'd say hello, and if you didn't say hello back, he would follow you and keep saying hello. And that's all I remember about him. We had another man from Morton that was in World War I that had he had stepped on an explosive device in World War I, and it caused him to never step off a curb without standing and move his foot this way, that way. And it was shell shock then. They have a different name for it now, but that was one of the unusual things we had.
This was back in the days when just about every small town had 2 or 3 people like that.
Yeah.
Just barely remember that.
Yeah, they didn't.
Kid where I grew up.
There were no problem, but
just do a couple of more and then we'll wrap up. But we talked about Main Street. I'm going to guess that Main Street ran, Jefferson and Main was at the center, so maybe ran from Jackson to Chicago or something maybe at the time, if that? length of Main Street when you were
Oh,
a kid?
the length of Main Street? Well, actually, it was called Tremont Street then. Main, when you go out to Queenwood was not built yet.
Right.
So that's where the town kind of ended. And North Main was right at the railroad track there. But I remember band concerts. They would have it right in on Main Street. They had a little problem later with that because that happened to be part of Route 121, Illinois Route 121,
Yeah.
and the state would govern that, and they would say, well, you cannot stop traffic for your band concert. And so that kind of killed the band concerts until the Park District came and built a facility where entertainment could be done.
Wasn't there a little bandstand there at Jefferson and Maine at one time, where the Butler Law Office is now, or near there? I remember something like that when I first moved here.
That was the going way back. That was Gallagher's Dry Goods. That building, and then it was Ben Franklin.
Yep.
And
okay.
I don't remember that
Right.
being.
Maybe it wasn't there. It might be my imagination.
Where Horseshoe Park was, there was a little gazebo type thing
I
there.
remember that. Yeah. Okay. And you remember the interurban railway?
Yes, I remember that. And the interurban building was tore down, and the First National Bank was built there. And when we was tearing it down, we ran into a cistern, and in digging out that cistern, it was totally full of wine and whiskey bottles, where men would get on that interurban, and they'd finish their drink and throw it down this hole, which happened to be the cistern. And over the years, that thing filled up with those.
Would that have been from Prohibition?
Could have been. I don't know. Prohibition ended the day and the hour that I was born.
Maybe you caused it.
July 27th,
Wow.
1933. It was the end of Prohibition.
Okay. Is there anything else that you can think of at this point that we haven't covered that we ought to have in here? We're going on and out.
No, I can't think of anything now. I'll probably think of a lot of stuff when I
We
get
can
home.
always add it. Okay.
You want me to sign this?
Yes, you need to fill that out if you would. Sign it. Okay.
Oh,
Did you turn
there
it
you
off?
go.
Did you turn that off? Okay. The clue you gave me that made me ask you about Switzerland was when you told me about the original spelling of Aupperle with the Y and the way it was pronounced.
Oh, yeah.
And I just guessed at, and this is my Caterpillar experience traveling over there.
It could have. Go ahead.
Swiss dialect, the pronunciation of the emphasis on words is different than Hochdeutsch.
Okay.
And you can just hear that with the Y on the end. And I thought, I wonder if they could have been in that part of that group, because they all got chased out of Switzerland, you know. The Reformed Church, the official church, but people were extremely cruel to the Anabaptists and basically ran them out.
My grandmother was from Switzerland, and her maiden name was Pertlwitz. Now that sounds Jewish to me.
What is it?
Pertlwitz.
Spell it.
Pertlwitz.
Hurlwitz. Yeah, it does sound a little like it.
So the interurban railroad was where the First National Bank was?
That's where the station was. The tracks were right where the plaza is now, approximately, I believe. And did you know George Armstrong at Caterpillar? Do you remember him? Was a group president. Lived here many years in Morton.
We did the concrete work for every president of Caterpillar from Earnhardt on up.
Well, he was a group president, not the president.
Okay. No, I probably.
Executive vice president is what we called him back then. And you might have known him, but he lived somewhere here in town, and they talked about the interurban, and people would ride. It's probably the absolute best way to get to Peoria, because automobile traffic would have been unreliable and probably slow. There wasn't a good road. 150 must have been the road. So, okay, you sat there and watched us and listened. What do you think?
I think it was. I appreciate it. I wondered where the bakery was that they got those donuts.
Norse?
It's still there.
Is it?
It's where the
glass shop?
the gal that used to make all of the pumpkins. Well, maybe you haven't been in town long enough. The little pumpkins for.
The glass shop?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, the glass.
Yeah, well, Grimm's store is there, and then it's the next
the
one.
next one.
Yeah.
It's Crown Realty now, but it was Lulu's,
Okay.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a girl named Roth lived upstairs. She was very talented. Okay, name, interview. Well, I'll let you figure that out.
And then
I'd misspell your name. That's why I'm going to let you do that.
Spell it the German way, it's okay. It was that way once.
I think there's a signature on the back. And then I'd like a photo of the two of you,
Okay.
if that's all right.
We can do it.
I appreciate it.
When Morton had its 100th or 125th celebration, I grew a mustache,
Oh,
about like yours, only I had enough of it on the end I could curl it a little bit. And
I'll go ahead and take this off.
oh yeah,
If you don't want.
I wouldn't get very far.
relationship to interviewer. I'm going to say none.
Friend.
We have friends. Yeah, just say friends. Comrades in arms.
There you go. Well, I appreciate it, guys. We'll have to.
Now, just for my own edification, did you?
Just read that.
Oh, great. Did you pick up on the points where I, instead of following the script, followed what he was talking about? Okay. That's what I want the high school kids to recognize that they're going to do. Doesn't mean don't do the list, because that's important when you do the list. But also when somebody says, that's when Uncle Freddie escaped from jail.
Tell me more.
Yeah.
Yeah. The character too. A couple of the characters in the stories. I've forgotten now the name of the guy, but it was fun.
Well, there was no end of characters in Casa Grande. Hans Casa Grande.
That guy.
That's what Hans is German. Casa Grande is Spanish for big house.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
He might have been.
Yeah.
He had nobody knows where he came from. He had no family.
Just kind of hung out.
But when I was a kid growing up,
he's the only homeless person we had in Morton then.
there was always one. There was always somebody, and there was somebody that had a family member who was maybe mentally deficient or disabled in some way or whatever. So there was always somebody's granddad or Uncle Billy or whatever, who was sort of went all around town by himself. And
I actually need you there too, if you would.
oh, for me or him?
For him.
Oh, okay. Need
Yeah.
another one, Ken.
Oh, what's
I need
this
your
one?
signature. It's just saying that you're okay with us publishing it on the library webpage.
Okay.
Did you write this, Ken?
Yeah.
It looks like your work. You are a good writer.
Well, it wasn't easy. You're writing my life story, and you'll probably find that out when you go through it there.
Writing is hard work.
It is the, let's see, 20th.
Yeah.
You know, this is the 30 years since the Roth did their book here.
Yeah.
This is the 30th year, and I thought more we should lean to try and pick up from that, the last 30 years, what happened.
Yeah.
And there are so many good people that aren't mentioned in this book that have been here and gone probably, that we should try to remember them too.
Yeah.
We have some high school students that are going to help out.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that maybe when they talk to each other and then also their family members, that maybe we can capture some of those
Yeah,
stories.
that would be good.
I'm going to work with the high school class, Ken, to kind of help with, do a little coaching and help get them prepared to do this. I have been asked.
I had real good luck hiring high school kids, you know, that they're a co-op thing.
Yes.
And that, and one of them, he was so good. I made him manager of my rental store. I owned Cook Rental, and he went on to become the head of Bartonville's streets, and
Oh.
Randy Sweeter's his name.
Oh.
Well, what do you think? Should we stand maybe right here with
Oh.
this in front of you
Oh, yeah. why
for a
don't
photo?
we- Sure, we can do that.
I'm going to open this because I think it'll help cool it off a little bit.
Yeah.
It's so warm in here.
Little warm.
The windows help with that. Okay. Let's see. Well, thanks for rolling with us. With Pumpkin Festival, we're a little bit short on space in here.
Sure that you are.
All right. Hold on. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to take a couple. Hold on. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to do one more. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank
Good.
you.
And I'm going to take this and read it, and I'll bring it back to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
We sure
All
do
right.
appreciate it.
Well,
Thank you.
I love this town and I love the people in it, and hopefully they won't forget me when I'm gone.
No, we won't forget you.
Take good care.
And you won't be gone for a while. Okay, what did I do? Glasses.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, we had a little bit of a glare on the glasses.
Oh,
but
really?
Yeah. I'll see
On
maybe
his?
if we can
Well,
get some.
don't worry too much about it. But, I mean,
Yeah. The story.
this is never going to be professional. You know, if you get a little glare on the glasses, that's really kind of immaterial to the rest of what we're doing. Better if we can avoid it, but
Sure.
you know.
We'll keep practicing, and the narrative is the good part.
I just found that just a little bit of an informed guess on my part. That kind of noise going in German. Just so sure. Many of them, when they first fled and lived persecution in Switzerland, he came out of Germany in 1971. They really had to make the census. Where did your family come from? Germany. Well, yeah, but not really. So, anyway, thank you, ma'am. I enjoyed doing it.
Thanks, Steve. Good. We're gonna do 4 bucks total. So 3 of the, so, yeah, so do you? Okay. Okay, great. I will, and I think they said that they're pushing I do, I haven't made those yet, but yes, I'm planning to make a.
But that's the last step anyway,
Yeah,
right?
just smack those on afterwards, for sure. Yeah, I'll smack them on.
Okay.
I'll get them all together for you.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, I know he's, I can.
One thing with the class, the high school class, anything that we need to learn or anything that we would want to do with them, we want to do it.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
To go on. Yeah, I think it was, we'll see how it went.